Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Warhammer 40,000 Deathwatch Tyranid Invasion. Enhanced Edition, apparently. It's by Rodeo Games, and this initially came out on iOS. Yes, indeed it did. So some of you are probably turning off already. I don't blame you. We've had plenty of bad mobile ports, although I wouldn't say that this is a bad mobile port, but it definitely suffers in many ways from being initially developed for mobile devices when you compare it to the bevy of turn-based tactics games available on PC natively. But it's Warhammer 40,000, and you know how I get with that. I like to check them all out and see just how enhanced is it really. You know, they did spend a decent amount of time working on the PC version. Is it any good? And more to the point, does it justify the fairly outrageous jump from $3 to $25? $3 on iOS, $25 the original equivalent on PC. Ha! We'll find out. Alright, to the settings menu. So this is actually an Unreal 4 game, so it doesn't look too bad. You'll notice that you have proper resolution options here, which is always good. Windowed on and off, and full VSync on or off, which is good. Borderless window would be nice. You then have quality, which allows you to customize shadows, textures, effects, post-processing, and AA. Couldn't tell you what kind of AA it uses, it doesn't tell you. This game is pretty light on the tooltips, as you'll find out, but it does have graphics options nonetheless, and then you have controls. This game is for the most part mouse-driven, but you do have the ability to use hotkeys, and that will make things a little bit easier. Those are the options. Not a great deal missing as far as I'm concerned for visuals, but there is one key thing that I am going to complain about over and over again in this video, so I'm going to make you aware of that before I even do it, which is there is no animation speed option. It is a turn-based battle game with no animation speed option, and that is infuriating for a number of reasons. Okay, so in this game you will be facing off against the Tyranids by playing the titular Deathwatch, which is the sort of combo chapter, as it were, of the Ordo Xenos. They are comprised of the best from a number of Space Marine chapters, and their mission is to deal with the most heinous of Xenos threats, alien threats to the Imperium. So, if we head over to Space Marines, you can see what I've got here, and we've got a wide variety. Got quite a few Ultramarines here, but we also have some Blood Angels. I believe there is a Space Wolf right there. In fact, I've got a couple of Space Wolves. I also have an Imperial Fist. So there's a couple of extra chapters that have been added into the Enhanced Edition, and depending on which chapters you have, it's going to influence what skills you'll be able to develop and what kind of synergies you can develop as well. For instance, there are several Ultramarines characters that will get a buff if you have a squad of Ultramarines. So the more Ultramarines you have in your 5-man squad, the more of a benefit they get. You'll also notice that things are tiered. So your basic units are tier 1. They go all the way up to tier 4 hero units. Tier 2 are veterans. Tier 3, as you can see here, are champions. And tier 4 are heroes. Now, at the start, when you have all of these guys at level 1, they all perform the same. However, the champions and the veterans and the heroes have a lot more capability to develop further. So let me show you the character development here. So let's click on Telion. He is a level 1 or a tier 1 Devastator. This is what he looks like. The actual aesthetic of this game is really quite impressive, although they completely overdid the Unreal 4 lighting effects. It's like, are these... I don't believe these lights are supposed to be here at all, but you've got to admit there's a lot of detail on these models. As somebody that really likes 40K, I was really quite impressed, and there's a lot of armor combinations and nice little details here and there. So that's kind of neat. But this guy has access to 2 traits and 1 ability, and he can also level up his health, accuracy, and crit. And of course he can equip a weapon here. However, if I click on Julius, who is a level 3 champion, he has access to 2 abilities and 5 traits. But at level 1, of course, he is just the same as a regular Assault Marine would be. So, the quandary when it comes to character development is whether or not you want to keep using your more leveled up tier 1 guys, or whether or not you want to replace them with a higher tiered unit which starts at level 1 and starts weaker, but has greater developmental potential. Now, how do you acquire these characters? Well, for most of these tier 2s and tier 3s, outside of the stuff that you get through the mission campaign, you get them out of packs. Now, the iOS version had microtransactions, and it allowed you to buy packs, but it also let you get them with in-game currency, and it gave you a pack after each act of the game was completed, and there are 10 acts in total, each with 4 missions. This currency up here, which you can earn either by selling items or by completing missions, will give you enough, hopefully, to buy a pack. And I'm going to show you some pack opening that I recorded earlier to show you exactly what you get out of them. But that's how you get the packs. Now, of course, in iOS, you could very easily just do microtransactions to get more if you so desire, but in this version, you're sort of bound to the same currency system that the iOS version had, but without any of the microtransactions. Which is a bit odd, because I have a feeling that the game was maybe balanced around the idea that you might buy a pack or two. So I think that your development is going to be a bit slower than iOS players would be as a result. That's not to say that these guys aren't perfectly capable. In fact, in normal mode, they're more than capable. I've actually found the game up to this point to be incredibly easy and have wanted to play the higher difficulty levels, but it wouldn't let me play them until I complete the entire campaign, which is 40 bloody missions on normal, which I think is ridiculous. A lot of the tier 4 loot and the really rare stuff is only available in those higher difficulty levels as well. So I feel that is very badly designed, and I think you should be able to jump back to earlier acts at higher difficulty levels before you beat the game. Anyway, let's have another look at some of the other character design stuff. So, as you can see, he has a melee weapon, a power sword, and a master-crafted plasma pistol. So, this is a tier 2 plasma pistol. The tier 2 weapons are better than the tier 1s, but they're harder to use. So that's a nice little balancing act that they've put in there. So if I head on back to my Devastator, for instance, he's using a tier 3 heavy bolter, which is the Scythe of Ultramar. This can only be used by Ultramarines. And it has specific stats and abilities. So I fire 40% extra volleys if the target was in half range of the weapon. That's a bolt-specific ability for bolt weapons. And it'll show you what it's got all this range and crit damage, but it's got quite low accuracy. So as a result, if I gave that, or say the Triplex Alpha, to a low-level Marine, he's going to perform very badly with it. It's a very powerful weapon, certainly, but they're better off with something like, a missile launch. Look, that gives plus 70% accuracy. If we go back to one of our regular Marines, like the guy with the plasma gun here, for instance, and I love that model, oh my god. The Unreal 4 lighting effects really do make these models pop, I've got to say. If I go to his weapons, he's currently using a regular plasma gun. And you can see I've got regular bolters there as well. If I had tier 2 versions of them, then you would be able to clearly see, oh, okay, so I get a bonus from that, but the accuracy is a lot lower. So you got to level the guys up in order to use those better weapons. Giving them a tier 4 weapon from level 1 is dumb and won't help you at all. So that's kind of how the leveling up works. You can either spend points on stats, or you can save them up for traits and abilities. This guy has 2 traits unlocked. If I click it, Bolt Specialization, and he also has Crippling Shot, so 2% chance to reduce target's action points by 1 per shot, and all that kind of thing. And he can unlock an ability, which is Crack Shot, and 3 War Gear slots. And War Gear slots can be grenades, health kits, and all that sort of thing. But of course, you might want to be developing your higher ranked guys. And I can understand why you want to do that, because look at all these traits this guy has. Red Thirst, of course, is a Blood Angel, so got very themed abilities here. And a lot of this stuff is really, really powerful, but it takes a lot of experience to get you there, so that can be a bit of a problem. Alright, let's show you how the gameplay works. That's how the loot works, that's how the inventory works in general. What I will say is, for the most part, this is fine, but it suffers from the good old iOS curse of we don't understand what hover over is, So, almost every game that comes from iOS does not have hover over functionality, and as a result, there's a lot of information that could be given here. Like, it would be nice if, while hovering over this plasma cannon, it would tell me all the other stuff. I want to know all of this information. Or if I hover over this ability, what does that do? Doesn't say. I've got to click it to find it out. This is all symptomatic of iOS development, and something that people that are very serious about moving their iOS games over to PC should bear in mind when they're developing things. That is not acceptable. Sure, I can go into the codex and look at things there, but the amount of clicks in order to actually get that information is ridiculous. I mean, we've got enough screen space to display all of this. I know on iOS that's not a thing, but people are using higher resolution monitors. We can fit all that text on the screen, and it should. Okay, into the campaign. So this is the only gameplay mode available right now. They're saying they're going to bring in PvP multiplayer, but it's currently not available. So I'm currently on Act 3. You get a prologue act of 4, which is basically a tutorial, and then you go through these acts right here, and we're about to jump onto Core Collection, which is part 3 of Act 3. This is where the game's starting to ramp up in difficulty a bit, but before this point, it was stupidly easy. The reason? Well, I think it's due to a lack of enemy variety in the earlier game. So this is my loadout right here. These are my 5 guys, and don't they look like absolute badasses? I've got to say, of all the 40K games, Deathwatch does maybe the best job of representing just how awe-inspiring and just lethal looking the Space Marines are. Super amount of detail, and I love the fact that the higher rank guys you get, the more little details they get on their armor. That's awesome purity seals there, and that weird little headdress thing that the Ultramarines do, but also the sort of halo that the Blood Angels do over there. I actually want to unlock some Dark Angels because they were my favorite Space Marine chapter and see how awesome they look. But even there, like Raldoran, for instance, is using a different kind of helmet. I think that might even be Iron Armor, Mach 3 possibly, with the little Blood Angel sigils on there. It's really great. Now from this screen you can actually upgrade as well, which is very helpful, and you can also swap your Marines out for different guys. If I want him out, I can swap him out for Mysterious or something along those lines. You can even rename, so if you want to do that, that is all available. So let's jump in. So we have a nice little setup here. We've got a guy with a plasma gun. He should be pretty good. We've got a couple of Assault Marines. One with a chainsword, one with a power sword, plasma pistol and hand flamer, a regular flamer, and the tier 3 heavy bolter. So a decent setup. And then we can jump into the game and show you exactly how it works. So far so good. With the loot and the loadout, there's quite a lot of depth and variety there. There's a lot of great character development and synergy you can create. Where, of course, this all falls apart is in the actual game itself. So this is a very simplistic turn-based game, and it's action point driven. All of your Space Marines have 4 action points. Weapons generally take 1 action point to fire, with the exception of the heavy stuff, and you've got to complete the various objectives. In this case, we're going to be picking up some material samples, and in this case, we can't actually use our weapon when we do that, which is a little bit annoying. If I use a... Yeah, I'm going to grab him and send him over there. So you'll notice that each movement is going to take an action point, obviously, as you might imagine, and outside of that, you're going to be moving out everybody else. Okay. So let's start to go through the issues here. First things first, oh my god, how slow is this game to move. Now, you can move characters at the same time as others, which is great, but if you want to take an action, you've got to wait for all animations to finish before you do it. And these animations can really take a while, especially the heavy guy. You know, he moves a bit slower, and his firing animation is so incredibly slow as well. Now, I've gone into Overwatch here, but I actually did spot some enemies over to the side, and they're going to take some shots at me, but... it's fine. Doesn't really matter too much at the moment. In come the little Hormigants. Are they Hormigants or Termagants? I think that was a Hormigant. This might be a Termagant. Well, maybe that's also a Hormigant, but you get the idea. In the enemy turn, you can accelerate things, which is great. But in your turn, you can't speed up the animations. This becomes infuriating. So if I want to kill this guy, you click once to aim, and then you click again to fire. Now, of course, the plasma gun is very dangerous, so we're able to kill him immediately. Alternatively, I can use things like my charged shot. Of course, hover over doesn't work at all, so you better remember what all of these abilities do, because otherwise you're not going to know. And right mouse button functionality is non-existent. You can use the right mouse button to do this. That's about it. If you want to move around the screen, it's best to use the mouse to drag. Left, right, up, and down. You can use WAS and D, but watch what happens if I also move the mouse. Whoa! Whoa! There we go. Yeah. It's pretty much unusable. So, not a huge fan of that. That's definitely a UI issue that they could absolutely solve very easily, I think. You can zoom out a little bit further there to make sure we don't run into people. The main problem is, of course, that you have to move very, very slowly. I could move multiple guys, but if I move multiple guys and I end up finding a Tyranid who was not in my line of sight and I can't kill him, then he's going to be able to shoot at me. It's not quite as brutal as XCOM by any stretch of the imagination. Your Marines can take quite a lot of punishment, but you're going to end up moving slowly to do it. And notice how it requires you to finish the whole animation before it lets you move again. Whole animation. Whole animation. Not ideal. The game promotes careful movement and play, and yet is incredibly frustrating to do in that way. So I'm not a fan of that, and that could very easily be fixed. Now, in terms of the game mechanics, they're very simple. You noticed action point-based stuff. Now, this is actually almost a carbon copy of Rodeo Games' previous title, the Hunters series, which is a tactical battle game on iOS that uses this 4-pip action point system. Not a lot of depth to that. Let's move a little bit. All right, hello. We found ourselves some fellows here, so I'm going to attack with my hand flamer. Hopefully try and take them out with that. That didn't do it, but we can attack again. The hand flamer has, in fact, all the flame weapons have the ability to hit people in a line, which is obviously quite powerful. I'm going to move him back there, so hopefully he's out of line of sight there. And we can move in our other flame guy over here and just try and roast the rest of the bastards. But this is really, really simple combat. You shoot, they die. in the vast majority of circumstances. The melee is kind of the same. You get into melee range, you take a swing. If you hit them, some melee guys have the ability to counterattack, and some guys have the ability to parry. But outside of that, it really is a case of, oh, hello. I didn't want to be too close to him, but we have a plasma weapon. We can do some damage. We managed to miss with all of that, which is really impressive, actually. That's a very, very poor piece of performance from our fellow over there. But maybe we can move in range with the heavy bolter and try and bring him down there before we take too much damage. And for some reason, we can't. And this is another problem I've got with the UI. It has no line of sight indicator at all. You would think that I should be able to shoot this guy. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. I can draw a straight line. No, I can't. I imagine, for the most part, that the line of sight is done via the grid. So if I moved here, I could shoot him, but that wouldn't matter because now I have to... I mean, I can't do anything with this guy anymore because the heavy bolter takes 2 rounds to shoot. It's like, yeah, he's probably in line of sight now, but that's no use to anybody. So... this is a pretty sucky situation, and our Space Marine's going to take some damage, no doubt. But it could really use a line of sight indicator. I want to know whether or not I can actually hit something. It's got a range indicator, but I need to know, look, can I hit somebody behind this small cover? Can I hit somebody from here? This looks like I can hit them, but I can't, there's no functionality to, like, draw a bead to them to determine whether or not that's true. And now our Space Marine's obviously going to take a huge amount of punishment here, most likely. Which is not ideal. And as a result, it makes actually playing this tactically a lot more difficult. And in reality, especially in normal mode, the best way to deal with this game is to just brute force it. And that really shouldn't be the case, as far as I'm concerned. And I was looking forward to hopefully playing a nice tactical game. Of course, I can't actually attack with him. I could roast him with a flamethrower. There we go. But the game makes it really hard to play tactically because of that lack of UI feedback. And honestly, the game's really, really simple anyway. It really is just a case of point and shoot, point and shoot. Use it for your abilities, point and shoot. And that's all you're really going to be getting out of it. There's not a lot of advanced stuff. Taking cover, flanking. There is one enemy type that can take more damage when being hit from the flank, which is kind of great, but I haven't even encountered that guy yet. And you know what I was saying earlier about the game being very easy initially? That's because it only throws termagants and hormagaunts at you for like the first 8 to 10 missions. There's one mission where you get to fight a couple of... what the hell are they? Tyranid warriors, yes, which are a little bit tougher. We just kill one there. But outside of that, you're just dealing with basic melee enemies and basic ranged enemies. And you can just destroy them so incredibly fast, especially if you've got a good set of weapons. So as a result, you end up being a bit bored. And it doesn't help that the games drag on as well. You'd think that the missions would be quite short, and some of them are, you know, because they were designed for iOS, but some of them can really take a while, and it's often down to the animation speed. If I could speed all this stuff up, and I could speed up my Marines moving and shooting, then I'd have less downtime, and I'd get less frustrated with the damn thing. But as it stands, that's just the way that the game is designed, and it doesn't have the ability to speed things up. You know, why is it that I cannot click to move and queue up an action? You know, queuing up an action would make this a lot easier. Why can't I queue 3 moves into a melee attack? That would make things a lot faster. Why couldn't I do that? I don't know. The game just doesn't have that functionality. You know, why does it take so long to shoot here? Why do I have to worry about that? I'm sorry, I'm wrestling with the controls right now because I keep defaulting back to trying to use the mouse along with the keyboard, and it ends up being a disaster piece. Why can't I do any of those things? I don't know, because the game just doesn't have that implementation. Because, hey, it used to be an iOS game. So what you've got here is a very mechanically simple turn-based battle game. Not a lot of complicated stuff going on, and is very, very easy at the lower levels. That would be solved, of course, by letting you play the higher difficulty levels earlier. I feel like I've got a bunch of leveled up guys, I can handle that, and I'd like to get those higher level drops, instead of just getting tier 1 drops. Like, hey, great, I got another bolt gun, not that I have 4 of those already, so I just end up having to sell that thing for 4 resources. Weirdly enough, everything sells for the same amount, which is very strange. You know, I'd think that the higher level weapons would sell for more, but they don't. So a tier 3 weapon sells for the same as a tier 1 bolt gun, which is really odd. I don't know why that would be the case, or how the game even benefits from that. I don't think it does. I have to wonder if that was designed to encourage people to buy microtransactions in the other version of the game. Maybe it was. But that would be speculation. And this level's going to drag on as well. I've got to carry 3 things over here. I might even just send multiple Marines over there to try and do it. I can't even end my turn until they've stopped moving. It's so silly. Have I enjoyed my time with it? I a lot of it's been pretty dull, I gotta be honest. If this wasn't 40k, I'd have already stopped playing. There's no doubt about that. The loot acquisition and the depth of the actual character progression is great. It's just a shame it's attached to such a relatively dull turn-based game. It could just be so very much better, and it is getting better. No, it really is. As I continue to progress through the levels and things get more complicated and I gain more war gear and more abilities, things get better. And, of course, as the enemies get more complex, that makes the game more enjoyable too. But it takes so long to get to that point. You know, why is it that only now I'm fighting Tyranid warriors and things like that? Managed to miss almost every shot. That's pretty pathetic. There you go. Kind of not nonsensical. Hey, I'll tell you what, though. I think this game has a really strong 40k theme. What you'll notice right here is the guys actually arguing amongst themselves. And they have different dialogue depending on which chapters make up your squad. So the Ultramarines are, of course, very big on adhering to the Codex Astartes, being very regimented, very loyal. The Blood Angels more violent. The Space Wolves, well, they're Space Vikings. They act like Space Vikings would. The Imperial Fists more defensive. And depending on the combination of people you've got, you'll get different dialogue. They'll argue amongst themselves. They'll share information about their chapters, and they'll argue about who was the best Primarch and who uses the best tactics. And there's actually a degree of animosity and competition there, and I think that's great. I've never seen that in a 40k game before. And it is actually a real element of the Space Marines in the 40,000 universe, that there is a level of competition, and some chapters just plain don't like or trust each other. And generally speaking, games don't properly represent that. The fact that this game does is awesome. It's really impressive. I like that a lot. It's very clear that the people that made this game actually understand 40k, and they probably enjoy it a lot. The problem is what they've made out of it. Aesthetic design, outside of the fact that obviously, you know, this is very low resolution and rubbish. The actual character models, great. The variety of loot, awesome. The variety of skills, even chapter specific, brilliant. But the actual game, fairly shallow. Pretty dull, slow, turn-based tactics game with very little going for it. No real cover system, poor UI feedback, as I mentioned before. A very basic system of Overwatch. And the annoying thing I think about Overwatch is that you have to sort of, and it says tap, you know, screw that. It's like, tap where you want to aim. It's like, okay, kind of over here then. And then that spends the thing and puts him in Overwatch. I'm not sure if I can reset it. Thankfully you can, but it's like, why is it that, for instance, when I select Overwatch, bearing in mind this is a PC game, that when I select to click, it doesn't show me, like, this is the cone. Like, why am I not seeing a cone here of fire? There's all sorts of things that this game really needs in comparison to other turn-based games on PC. And there's the real trick, isn't it? Because on PC, we already have a bunch of turn-based tactics games. This is not a new genre. On iOS, high-quality turn-based tactics games are few and far between. So you can get away with this kind of stuff. And of course, you wouldn't have the whole hover over on a touch-based device. But here comes the big rub. They upped the price of this game to $25 on PC, claiming it was an enhanced version. And yet, the only enhancements that I see, other than a few pieces of extra content, are graphical. And they're not that impressive to begin with. So, really, the enhancements that were required were UI specific, not graphical enhancements. You needed better UI. You needed it to compete with the other games of this genre on this device. And they have failed to do that. So, really, would I recommend this? Well, no, I wouldn't. If you're into 40k, yeah, the loot's great and the character progression is great. And you're not going to find a lot of games that really go down to that level of detail. Even to the fact that, like, my Blood Angel has an ability which lets me attack everybody in range. It's literally the Black Rage, which I thought was really kind of cool. But just the basic, you know, the core underlying mechanics are so basic and so relatively dull, and the UI is just not very good. And that's a shame. That's a real shame, because it is a well-themed 40k game, but if you look at it, it really is just a 40k re-theme of Hunters and Hunters 2, which are Rodeo's previous games. And I don't think it necessarily does it justice, which is a shame, because they've obviously put a lot of effort into making it, you know, a really legitimate 40k game. It's just the mechanics let it down. Oh well. The price tag right now, not even close to being reasonable. Why is it so many times more expensive than the version on iOS? I couldn't tell you, because it plays exactly the same, and there's not enough extra content to justify it. When this game goes down in price, and hopefully when they patch it to improve the UI, this will be a much easier game to recommend. It's like, okay, it's simple, but if I'm only paying a few dollars for it and playing it in short bursts, that doesn't really matter, does it? That's okay. That's the sort of thing that would be tolerable. But for $25? No, I'm afraid not. Even if you really like 40K, which I absolutely do, that's a hard sell, I'm afraid. It really, really is. Very hard sell. Far too simplistic to justify that price tag, I think. Warhammer 40,000 Deathwatch, ladies and gentlemen, available on Steam for $25, or get on iOS for $3. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.